Thank y'all. Thank y'all. The marathon continue. Victory lap tonight, though. Victory lap tonight. Yeah.
Welcome to the OneTalk Podcast with Ryan McCarthy.
The marathon continues. That's what you would say.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the OneTalk Podcast. You're here with Ryan McCarthy. And today we're doing a solo episode. Today, I really wanted to reflect on recording 100 episodes. I've actually recorded more, but I've released 100 so far. So if you are listening to this, it'll be episode 101. But I really want to reflect on doing over 100 episodes. I do feel like it is a big milestone, even though I also feel like this is just the beginning of the podcast journey. And I actually truly feel like I've only just begun. But doing 100 episodes is something I am very proud of. When I first started this podcast in February 2021, so just over 3 years ago now, I knew I was going to be consistent with it, but I don't believe I had number 100 in mind of doing this podcast. So to actually be here now and have you all on the journey with me, it's fantastic. And this podcast, it wouldn't be anything if it wasn't for all of you guys listening in and actually paying attention to the work I do, paying attention to the value I attempt to bring in with the guests that I bring on the show and some of the solo episodes that I do as well. So I just want to start this episode with just my absolute gratitude for everyone that actually listens in, because like I said, OneTalk is for the people and you support it, and I'm super grateful for that. But let's get into some of the topics I want to talk about today. So a bit of context and backstory. Some people may know, some people may not. But this podcast actually started in February 2021. And the first ever episode was in the Brisbane Library. And the microphone was in the middle of a table, about hundreds and hundreds of people speaking in the background. And the audio quality was absolutely horrible. Like the actual quality of the podcast wasn't good. But I knew at the time I really just wanted to start this podcast. And I had this one quote that stuck in my head that I believe could actually add some value to everyone else: is you don't have to be amazing to start. You have to start so you can become amazing. And with that in mind, just knowing that I just got to start and eventually it'll evolve and manifest into something that I'm truly proud of, really motivated me just taking that step in the first place and being like, you know what? I don't have the best microphone. I don't have video. I don't have production. I don't know how to market. When I recorded the first episode, I didn't even know how to upload it on the Spotify. I believe the only thing I knew how to upload it to was YouTube. So I was super fresh, super new, but I love doing it that way. Like, even though now I say to people, if you are wanting to start a podcast, reach out to me or reach out to someone you know that's got a podcast and learn from them, because you can learn so much and skip past so much, I guess failures along the way or things that you need to learn, and just save yourself a lot of time as well. You could actually save yourself a lot of time just by asking someone the right questions and getting them to guide you. Because if you do it my way, it is a lot longer when I first started, but I'm very grateful I did do it that way, because I feel like I learned so much and I've learned so many skill sets just by starting from scratch and absolutely winging it. But in saying that, I just wanted to say, like, if you do have a goal or if you have something that you really want to achieve in life, but you don't feel like you're ready or you don't feel like you're there yet, just remember you have to start so it can become amazing. If you never start, it never will manifest into that. If you never start, it will never evolve into something amazing. It will just consistently be an idea in your mind that you never release into the world or take any action on. It'll just be an idea of a story that you continually to tell yourself. So actually just take the action and do the thing. Just do the thing. But when I recorded the first episode in 2021, I was really nervous actually doing the podcast, which is funny to say because now it's just completely second nature to me. But if you were here from day one, I'm actually looking here right now. Episode 1 got published on February 21st, 2021. So if you're from day one, you'd know that one of my best mates, Gaudi, was the co-host for the first 6 episodes of the podcast. So me and Gaudi started the podcast together, and then episode 6, Gaudi had other ambitions in life, and he wanted to prioritize his career he's doing now, which he's thriving in. I'm seeing him do some amazing things, and I'm glad that he had the awareness to make that decision and focus on his path. But I knew this podcast was something special and also something that I wanted to continue because I knew it was a way to bring value to the world, get guests on that you may not be able to talk to either way, but also just a chance to record conversations and share them on a platform where it's free to access, where the only thing it costs you is your time by listening. And you can listen to so many people's stories, so many people's expertise, so much knowledge, wisdom, lessons, wins, failures, success, so many different things. But the first 6 episodes was me and Gaudi, and then from there, I just solo winged it from there and tried to make something of it from then. And it took a while to get some traction because I believe it was yeah, my first 12 episodes were audio only. So I didn't do video at all for my first 12 episodes. And reflecting back now, that's something that I would highly recommend people do from the jump is to actually make your podcast video and audio because clips is so important. Because I remember creating content or like marketing like reels and TikToks and stuff at the time. And there was no video, it was like just a plain picture with captions over it. And it wasn't looking good at all. And it wasn't getting any traction. So once I started adding video to it, that's when it really kickstarted. But the journey of it is gained me so much network and like I've gained new friends and potential businesses acquaintances from every age of the world from doing this podcast. And I've learned so much. I know from me learning so much, I know the people listening must have learned at least something. And that's the whole goal of this podcast is to share value with the world and hopefully it reaches someone and create a positive change in their life. Because for me, my journey, my story, a lot of people know my story. If you don't, I've done multiple podcasts talking about it, but a quick overview of my journey and my passion is because I was addicted to drugs from the age of 11 and I got sober at 18. Then from 18 till now, I'm 26 years old. I've just been on this self improvement journey of becoming the best version of me, learning more about myself. And I believe that's why I'm also passionate about this podcast because I get to interview people on their skill sets and it helps me learn more about me. And also in return, get to add some more value to the world. But also my communication skills, I believe, has improved a lot just by doing this podcast. I know when I first got sober from drugs, I struggled a lot with social anxiety. I didn't know how to be in social settings. I was very withdrawn, isolated, and I just didn't know how to actually socialize with people, especially strangers and new people. And it's a big jump from from not being able to socialize with people to then never ever meeting someone in your life and then doing a 2 hour podcast with them. Like it is a big step. So I do believe doing this podcast has really helped me in my social skills, communication, and overall just helped me become a better version of myself. And one other thing I also love about podcasting is the storytelling power because if you think about us as humans and evolution, everything that we learn, all wisdom, all knowledge, it's all stories or information that's pushed on from the generation before us to the generation now. And that's whether it's documented in books and then we pick up the books and we read them, or someone tells us information from the past and then we have that in the current life today. So it's another form of storytelling. That's another reason why I love podcasting. And I do have quite a few inspirations as well when it comes to podcasts. Some of the people that I listen to that I really examine because when I first got on the podcast and the main person I listened to was Joe Rogan. And I started listening to Joe and I really like I guess, I really enjoyed his approach to podcasting with how curious he was and he wasn't doing it in from a standpoint where he was the expert. It's just he knows a collective of information, brings on guests, and then just shares his opinion and remains curious with every guest that comes on. So I really like that approach, and I believe I've taken that approach with my podcast as well. Not sitting here saying I'm the expert on these topics, instead saying I remain curious. I really want to learn, and I really want to connect and get the most value out of each person. So that did really inspire me as well. Just Joe Rogan and that ability to be able to listen attentively. And that's another big thing I believe I've learned from podcasting is the ability to listen and the ability to listen to understand. Because when you record the podcast, like it's a bit different recording and just being a consumer because as a consumer, you can just listen to a podcast and just, you indulge in the information. But when you're the host and you've also got to listen to the information that they are speaking about, but also in your brain at the exact same time, think of questions or things to say as soon as there's a pause. That was a skill set I had to learn within itself because when I first started podcasting, I wasn't doing the two. I was just listening. And then when they stopped talking, I was like, oh shit, I've got to think of a question. And it took me a few episodes to start getting on top of that. But I do believe it was around like episode maybe 20 where I really started to pick up on that and improve that skill to now where if someone finishes their topic or finishes whatever they're talking about, I have at least 2 to 5 points in my head that I want to get to, I want to cover. So the ability to listen to understand, but also think at the same time is something that I didn't think the brain was possible to do, but it just shows like how special our brain is and the power of it and the ability that it can create. And saying all this, like all these things I've learned, I'm continuing to learn. Being on episode 100 or 101 now, if you're listening to this, it really does feel like the beginning because I feel like this first 100 episodes has been me just doing my apprenticeship. This 100 episodes literally has felt like my apprenticeship to podcasting. And now I feel like I'm completely ready. And I guess you could say I have always felt ready with all the guests that I've had on because I'm super prepared when I tee up a guest to come on, rather they reach out to me and we organize it, whether I have a podcast agency reach out to me and we organize it, or I reach out to someone. I always give myself at least 2 weeks from the date of contact to the date of the podcast. I always give myself at least 2 weeks to record the podcast with that person because I want to do as much research as possible into that person. I can't just be like, all right, speak to the person. They're like, all right, let's get in the podcast tomorrow because I don't have 8 hours. And within that 8 hours, I'm busy as well. So to try and squeeze within that 8 hours for me to research as much as possible about this individual to get a good episode just isn't possible at all. So it's just so a bit of insight is like when I do prepare for a podcast, like I said, I like to leave at least a 2 week gap so I can put in the time and effort to research. So if the person has done a podcast or done multiple podcasts, I'll listen to as many as possible and take down notes and talking points or things they touched on. And the thing that I take away from listening to podcasts they've already done, I make a conscious effort of not asking the same questions that the other podcast people have asked them. Because sometimes if you have like a certain guest that goes to multiple podcasts, you can have them just repeating the same information because each different host is just asking them the same question. Maybe they're asking it slightly different, but overall the question's the same, the answer's the same. And yeah, sometimes I fall into that too, but something that I make sure I am conscious of to make sure I am not just repeating information over and over again. Like I like to try and make every episode unique to itself, ask different questions, maybe come from a different angle, or even if you have the exact same question, but you ask it differently, you can get a slightly different answer out of it. So I do like to think a bit more deeper into the research I do and think a bit more deeper into the questions I ask. So that's the first point. I usually find out any podcast they've done and just hammer as many as I can. Unless like someone that's done 20 episodes and I don't have time for 20 episodes. But I'll usually get to at least five if they've done more than five episodes. Then from there, I usually like to go to their social medias and scroll to the absolute bottom. Find out their first ever post and look at their journey on social media, look at their journey for the work they've done up until today, which is awesome. Sometimes someone's only been on social media for a year and a half, so you don't get too much. But if you have someone that has been on Instagram, let's say since 2017, right? That's so many years. I think that's 7 years of scrolling you can do through their post and dedicate like an hour, 2 hours to that within that 2 week frame just to really dive into their content and what they're passionate about, truly understand them. And another point of information I like to look for is maybe any articles they've wrote, any blogs they've wrote, any research papers they've wrote, depending on the guest. And then from there, I also like to figure out the events they run, all the information about it. So I literally collect as much information as I can about the person I'm interviewing. And then I'd say 2 days before the podcast is going to happen, I then do a brain dump of all the information I've collected about this person and maybe topics, questions, information, certain points of view that they have. Like, is anything that comes out of my mind into that brain dump. I like to dump it all out 2 days before just to get the mind ready for the podcast. And then the day before, I usually have a bit of a break. I don't think about it. And then the day of, I then have the refresher of the brain dump and look through it all. And then I get to the podcast. And then when we start recording, I already know a lot about the person, which is super helpful because I feel like it gets a lot more out of the episode. It also makes me feel more comfortable as a host because then I feel like I know the person. Even though I've never spoken to them, I've read so much of their work. I've scrolled through their social medias. I've listened to all their podcasts. I've read all their blogs that I feel like I have a good grip of understanding of who they are, their mission, their values. And that way I can tailor my interviewing style to each individual. So that approach to truly understanding each guest, I find has been super helpful. And it's something I'm glad that I take a lot of pride and passion into is actually understanding. Because at the start, I would get guests on, I'd do no research into them or very little. Like I'd have a base understanding of them. And I wouldn't ask quality questions at the start of the OneTalk podcast back in the day. And the podcast game is super competitive. There's loads of them out there. And to be the best, you got to willing to put in the work and take that extra step and be a lot more dedicated than the average person is. So I do like to be as switched on as possible because the podcast is something that I love to do. I'm very passionate about it. And I really want to make sure that the people listening are actually getting their time's worth because if I record on average a podcast that's about 90 minutes, I say average, my podcasts go for about 90 minutes. If I'm taking 90 minutes out of someone's life when they could rather be with their family, their partner, they could rather be doing work, they could rather be doing whatever it is that they want to do in life. But instead, they're dedicating that time to trust in OneTalk and the message it's bringing. They want to make sure that their time is actually, I want to make sure that their time is actually appreciated and that I actually give the value that I want to bring to that. But that's basically it in terms of my research that I do. When it comes to podcasting as well, there's multiple factors that a lot of people may not, I guess, realize when it comes to it. Because when I first started podcasting, I thought it was mainly just jumping in front of a microphone, recording, stop recording, upload to YouTube, and you're done. But you learn so many skills like marketing. You learn so many skills with social skills. Editing was a big one that I had to learn. But the beautiful thing about today's day and age is that YouTube is a free resource that we can utilize and essentially learn any bit of information, learn any skill that we really want to for YouTube. So YouTube has been a massive savior for my podcasting journey. I'm just super pumped for this next stage of it. You know, from episode 100 to episode 200, I feel like it's about to be the best 100 episodes back to back to back for 100 episodes there's going to be out there in terms of podcasting. I've got so many great guests lined up. I've got so much great guests that I'm going to be reaching out to. I also this year going to start looking to traveling a lot more with the podcast as well nationally, and actually going out on the road and coming to people rather than people coming to the studio, and just really getting the message out there and creating this thing to be something that is I wouldn't say a household name, but I just really want this to be a big podcast. And I know for this to be a big podcast, I have to provide as much value as possible and attempt to become the best version of myself along this journey. I do know I'm going to make mistakes along the way, but I feel like if you're not making mistakes to a certain extent, then you aren't trying enough. If you're constantly winning, it's like, okay, are you truly pushing yourself completely? If you just constantly win. So I'm keen for the lessons along the way. I'm keen for you all to be in this journey with me along the way as well. But yeah, 100 episodes. There wasn't too much I wanted to touch on this. I just wanted to give, have a review and reflection of the journey so far. It's been beautiful. Met so many great people. Also, listeners as well that message me and DM me and talk to me about the podcast or share the podcast. That's amazing as well. But that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed. It wasn't the average 90 minutes as you'd expect, but I just wanted this to be for my fans out there or my audience out there listening. I want to hear my review on 100 episodes and my goals going forward. And yeah, I'm going to try my best. I'm going to continue showing up and I'm super excited. So without further ado, tune in for next week. I appreciate you all for listening again. I hope you have a blessed day. God bless.